Welcome to Board Ghost, a story podcast with games as the engine. We're going to play a number of games, but one of our favorites to play is Fiasco. So we're going to have a supplement episode for it, and we'll try to make supplement episodes for other game engines that we like to go back to. That way, you don't have to hear us describe the game once you already have learned how the game works. This is also a great place if you haven't played Fiasco before or want a refresher to pop back and listen to how the game gets played out. So when you go to listen to a Fiasco episode, you know what's going on. Fiasco is a collaborative storytelling game for 3 to 5 players. Collaborative storytelling games are distinct from other role-playing games in a couple of big ways. 1, you often don't have a DM, the players and groups are responsible for moving the game along, and 2, you don't need to always be your character. Often you're telling the story around the characters as often as you're playing the character itself. Fiasco is structured to be played in 2 acts, with an act break in the middle called the tilt, and a final montage scene called the aftermath. The materials for play are simple. 1, a book of rules, which also has a table for the tilt and the aftermath tables. 2, a playset. This is a series of tables, relationships, needs, objects, and locations. Each table has 6 categories, and each category has 6 subcategories. Playsets are found in the game book, in supplement books, and can also be found online. You can also write your own playsets. The categories and subcategories of a playset are designed to fit the theme of that playset. Thirdly, you'll have 6-sided dice, 2 white die and 2 black die per player. So for each player, you put 4 of these dice in the center of the table, 2 positive color, 2 negative color. Fourthly, you have some index cards or scraps of paper, something to write on. Fifthly, you would have some writing utensils, Sharpies, some pencils, pens, etc. At the beginning, you need to determine the web of relationships at your table and some of the needs, objects, or locations that are in play in the story. Each player sitting around the table will have a relationship with the person to their left and the person to their right by the time you've finished your web. First, you take all the dice. The color doesn't matter at this stage, and roll them all to get an array of numbers. Then the first player looks at the tables in the playset and determines what they'd like to define using the numbers available to them. As noted above, there are 6 categories in each table, which correspond to the numbers available on the die 1 through 6. The player picks a category, takes that corresponding number out of the pool of dice, and writes down the category on a card. If they are defining a relationship, they place that card down between the 2 people who will share that relationship, often the person to their left or their right. The second player now has a choice. They can pick a new category from the tables to define, or they can subdefine the category that has already been chosen by another player. For the latter, they look at the table and at the category in the playset. There they'll find the 6 subcategories they can choose from, again corresponding to the number on a die, 1 through 6, and with the limitations being the numbers rolled in the pool of dice. This continues until all the numbers in the pool of dice are used up and every player has a relationship fully defined, a category and subcategory, with each person to their left and right around the table in a circle. You will often also have some needs, objects, and locations defined and placed in the center of the table for everyone to play off of. The last thing everyone does is make a name tag. Folding up an index card to make a standee is my go-to, where they write down the name of their character so everyone else can see it. You announce who your characters are, give what backstory you think you need, and then you start the first scene. Before the first scene, all the dice are placed back in the center. Their numbers don't matter now. The color of the die is what is important going into Act 1. In Act 1, each player takes turns. They can choose to tell their scene and let the group determine the outcome, or let the group tell the scene when the player will determine that outcome. The scene is played out and the outcome chosen. Then the player describes how that outcome plays out to wrap up their scene. Outcome is determined by the color of the die you are given or take at the end of the scene. A positive color equals a positive outcome, a negative color a negative outcome. In the first act, you bounce the die to another player at the table after you've chosen or been given a die. So if I'm given a white die, I give that die away to another player, anyone that I'd like to. When half the die are gone from the center of the table, Act 1 is ended, and you enter the tilt. Players take what die they have and roll them. The color and number matter for the purposes of this roll. Each player looks at the positive number totals and negative number totals and adds them together, such that a player with a higher negative roll will end up with a negative number, and a player with a higher positive roll ends up with a positive number. Example, I roll 2 white die and 1 black die. I roll a 1 on one white die and a 2 on the other, so my total in the white dice is 3. And on the black die, I roll a 6. So now I have a 6 negative and a 3 positive. When I add those together, my grand total is -3. Two players, the one with the highest positive total and the one with the lowest negative total, are the ones who define the tilt. There's a tilt table similar to the playset tables, needs, relationships, etc. And this tilt table has 6 categories and 6 subcategories under each category. The two players, the highest and lowest totals, take their number they rolled, those dice, and use them as their pool to define 2 new tilt situations. So they pick a category and a subcategory for each one. Tilts inevitably add something bad or precipitous to the game going into Act 2, as all the players will work to incorporate something of the tilts into their scenes. Act 2 plays just like Act 1. You play through the remaining dice that weren't used in Act 1, one scene at a time, letting the group set the scene while you choose the outcome, or setting the scene and letting the group determine the outcome. The exception is instead of bouncing the outcome die to another player, you keep the die you are given or chosen for your outcome. This continues from player to player until all the dice are used up. Example, if I let the table set my scene and I choose a black die, I keep that black die, whereas in Act 1, if I let the table set my scene and I chose a black die, I would get to bounce that black die to another player. So now you enter the last stage of the game, the aftermath. As in the tilt, each player rolls their die and totals them up, positives plus negatives. Then all players consult the aftermath table. Players with more positive die consult the white high side of the chart, and players with more negative die will consult the black high side of the chart. The charts are ranges of numbers and a description besides each range. You find the range your rolled dice totaled and read that description. So on the -6 side, you'd look for where -6 falls in the range on the table and read the little bit of text next to it. You read that description. That is the tone and flavor for your character's aftermath. With each player having an aftermath description to work from, you take turns picking one die from the die you earn throughout the game and tell short scenes like in a montage as you deposit that die back into the middle. You go around until everyone is out of dice. That's it. Each game takes about an hour and a half to 3 hours, depending on the number of people playing and how into their scenes and building their scenes are. And that's Fiasco. Thanks for listening, Board Ghosts, and we'll see you on the table.
Living is a highway, then heaven is a bus stop. Been waiting for a